Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. In an era before child seats and seat belts became mandatory, families traveled with children loose in the car. During the 1960s and 1970s, it was common for children to play in the backseat while their parents drove. Roller disco parties became popular among young adults in the 1970s, combining lively music and skating. Many events also included roller dancing competitions. If you were one of the cool kids of the 1980s, you likely had a pair of LA Gear sneakers. These shoes became a fashion icon of the time and were a status symbol among young people. Pinball machines and arcade games attracted many young people who spent hours competing. These spaces gained popularity with flashing lights and immersive sounds, paving the way for the future video game era. A young couple prepares for the prom in 1961, posing for a photo at home. This was a special and highly anticipated moment for teenagers, marking an important tradition of youth. Teenagers at a drive-in in Illinois in 1960. Leaning against their car, they enjoyed the evening while waiting for the movie to start. In the 1960s, beauty salons were always bustling, with women striving for the iconic voluminous hair of the time. Between hairsprays and curlers, they spent hours achieving the high, elaborate hairstyles that became a hallmark of the decade. This 1965 photo shows flight attendants posing in colorful, stylish uniforms, capturing the optimism and energy of the era. A typical scene from the 1960s in Malibu, California. Colorful cars and vans parked by the beach, with people enjoying the sun, surfers in the water, and improvised tents. Actor John Travolta dances with actress Karen Gorney in the film Saturday Night Fever, which premiered on February 27, 1978. The film became a pop culture landmark, bringing the disco scene to the masses and popularizing disco music. A typical American suburb in 1964 with a classic station wagon parked in front of a house. This family lifestyle with big cars and quiet neighborhoods represented the peak of the suburban dream. Two girls run happily toward a 1957 Ford Fairlane convertible. This model stood out for its chrome details and was popular among American families. This large-screen TV from 1979 with a sturdy wood design and built-in VCR weighed about 132 pounds and had a screen around 25 to 30 inches. It was considered huge for the time and offered a cinematic experience for families who could accommodate it. Tie-dye shirts were a staple of youth fashion, associated with the hippie movement and the culture of peace and love. With vibrant colors and unique patterns, each piece represented individuality and freedom of expression. In 1966, visitors to Tomorrowland at Disney experienced a futuristic vision of technology and innovation. Inspired by the possibilities of the future, the area featured attractions like automatic cars and space travel. The McDonald's menu of that era was simple: hamburgers, French fries, drinks, and milkshakes, costing between 10 and 20 cents. There were no large-size items that would later become popular. The first McDonald's drive-thru opened in 1975 in Sierra Vista, Arizona, near a military base. It was created to serve soldiers who, in combat gear, couldn't enter the restaurant, starting a trend that soon spread. The green leather interior with wood trim and chrome details highlights the luxury of American cars from the 1960s and 1970s. These models offered high-quality materials, typical of premium vehicles of the time. Boys play basketball on the sidewalk around 1970, turning the street into an improvised court. Without cell phones or video games, they spent hours outdoors exploring and creating their own fun. A Burger King storefront in the 1970s. At that time, the restaurant was known for its slogan, "Have it your way," allowing customers to customize their orders, which was innovative for fast food chains. Taking a break from skating at Venice Beach. At the time, men wore short shorts and cropped tops, showing how fashion was much more liberal than today. High socks completed the 1970s look. Jane Fonda became the queen of home workouts in the 1980s. Her series Jane Fonda's Workout sold about 17 million copies, shaping the fitness industry and popularizing exercise at home. Before becoming an actor and governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a bodybuilder. He amazed people with his weightlifting skills, as men of his physique were rare and gyms were not popular at the time. The 1970s marked the beginning of the video game industry, with the first mainstream success being Pong, released in 1972. This game stirred up the market and paved the way for an industry worth billions today. Despite the popularity of the Walkman, many who preferred group listening were fans of the boombox. These large devices, common in urban areas, became symbols of American hip-hop culture. The early 1980s brought a revolution in music technology with the Sony Walkman. This portable cassette player became so popular that, by 1983, cassettes began outselling vinyl records for the first time. An adult theater displays a feature on its marquee in 1970. This type of cinema became popular at the time, and the marquees often featured provocative titles, attracting those seeking a different kind of entertainment. Linda Carter stands out in her iconic portrayal of Wonder Woman. The 1970s television series brought the superhero to life, with her red and blue outfit, golden belt, and tiara. Her performance captivated audiences and solidified Wonder Woman's image in pop culture. Here, we see a woman from the 1980s walking through an airport while talking on her cell phone. At that time, cell phones were large and heavy, quite different from the compact models we have today. In a 1989 photo, a mother helps her children pass a difficult level in Super Mario on the new Game Boy. With the popularity of the console launched in 1985, this new device allowed kids to take Super Mario Bros. Anywhere. Before Beanie Babies, Cabbage Patch Kids dominated the 1980s. Created by Xavier Roberts in 1977, they became so popular that parents even fought in stores to buy them. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, released in 1982, made everyone want a little alien friend. Directed by Steven Spielberg, the film grossed over $400 million, and the phrase "E.T. Phone Home" became a pop culture icon. A woman walks through the streets wearing a purple miniskirt and lace blouse, embodying the bold styles of the late 1960s, when the miniskirt became a symbol of female freedom and cultural rebellion. In 1978, disco music dominated the dance floors with colorful lights, mirrored balls, and infectious beats. Young people gathered in clubs to dance to hits by artists like the Bee Gees and Donna Summer in a style full of energy and flair. The New York subway in the 1970s, covered in graffiti and vandalism, became a meeting place for young people and a symbol of underground culture. The city's financial crisis made subway maintenance challenging, creating a chaotic environment. Loudspeakers line up at an empty drive-in theater in Spring Valley, New York in 1973. Each car parked next to one of these devices, which was attached to the window so passengers could hear the movie's audio. The Sesame Street Muppets transformed children's television programming, bringing an innovative and entertaining approach that delighted kids and educators, marking a new era in educational entertainment. In front of a church in Virginia in 1964, a boy observes a car decorated with ribbons and the message, "Just Married," a typical scene of wedding celebrations at the time. This packed highway in Hollywood in May 1972 shows the intense traffic of the time. Iconic cars like the Ford Mustang, Chevrolet Impala, and Dodge Charger dominated the roads, symbols of the American car culture of the 1970s. Actress and model Vanessa Williams won the Miss America pageant in 1984, becoming the first African-American queen. Her victory was a milestone that paved the way for other black women in the competition. In the 1980s, the punk rock subculture grew, becoming more hardcore and provocative. Punk rockers wore torn clothes, studs, spikes, chains, leather jackets, dark eyeliner, and striking makeup. A woman holds the latest Bruce Springsteen album in one of the most popular record stores of the time, Tower Records, which, unfortunately, closed in 2006. The wood-paneled walls and bulky television set characterized the living room of any family. This style featured sturdy furniture with a focus on family comfort. The television was the center of entertainment, bringing everyone together to watch programs and movies. Along Albuquerque in 1969, the iconic Route 66 was a lively road filled with colorful motels, classic diners, and neon signs, offering an unforgettable stop for those traveling across the heart of the United States. In the 1960s, it was still common to see carriages in Dodge City, Kansas, a scene that recalled the city's past as an iconic Western town, preserving its traditions even as modernization progressed. The first CD, 52nd Street by Billy Joel, was released in 1982. CDs provided a convenient way to listen to music compared to vinyl and tapes, though they were susceptible to scratches and drops. Many who lived through the 1980s remember when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded shortly after takeoff. The accident killed all 7 astronauts on board, shocking the nation. Teens watched the latest music videos on MTV, which became a phenomenon in the 1980s. The network revolutionized music consumption, ushering in a new era of music videos and helping launch numerous artists' careers. Cable television led to daytime educational programming for kids. After school, children rushed home to watch G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, He-Man, and the Real Ghostbusters. The launch of the IBM personal computer in 1981 marked the start of the PC era. Compact and accessible to businesses and home users, it quickly popularized personal computer use. The Tamagotchi, a virtual pet toy requiring constant care, became a phenomenon in the 1990s. Children and teenagers devoted hours to their digital pets, making it a classic electronic game. Apple's Classroom of Tomorrow brought an innovative vision for education, equipped with Macintosh computers and interactive software, aiming to transform teaching with integrated technology. Blockbuster, now a relic of a bygone era, was one of the biggest names in movie and video game rentals. Back then, visiting the store to pick new releases was a tradition before the age of streaming. The band Kiss paraded through the streets of New York in 1976, drawing attention with their striking makeup and bold costumes. Already rock icons, the group brought their unique look to the city, reinforcing their legacy in 1970s culture. When Pac-Man debuted in October 1980, Americans flocked to arcades, drawn to the game's innovative and addictive gameplay. Soon, Pac-Man became a phenomenon, defining the arcade scene of the 1980s. Dorm room phone time was a common ritual in 1970. Students shared phones and waited in line to call family and friends, as staying in touch required patience. The mullet hairstyle was an icon of the 1980s, characterized by short hair in the front and longer in the back. Popular among musicians and athletes, the cut defined the decade's fashion with its bold and versatile look. After the release of Top Gun in 1986, aviator leather jackets became a craze. Inspired by Tom Cruise's style in the film, the jacket became a classic, associated with a look of attitude and adventure. The aviator-style sunglasses of the 1980s became an iconic accessory. With large lenses and metal frames, these sunglasses were popular among celebrities and became part of the cool style of the era. In the 1970s, bell-bottom pants became a sensation among young people and adults alike. With wide flares and a snug fit at the thighs, this style stood out in period fashion, suitable for both casual and chic looks. Michael Jackson's Thriller, released in 1982, revolutionized pop music. With iconic music videos and choreography, the album became one of the best-selling of all time, establishing Jackson as the king of pop. In the 1970s, the custom van trend grew among young people. With colorful paint jobs and personalized interiors, these vans became symbols of freedom, allowing exploration and life on the road. The launch of the Ford Mustang in 1964 introduced an iconic sports car that quickly became a symbol of American car culture, capturing enthusiasts with its design and performance. Owning a Harley-Davidson became a symbol of independence and rebellious spirit in the 1960s and 1970s. During this period, motorcycle culture blossomed, attracting those who sought adventure on the open road. The release of The Terminator in 1984, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, revolutionized science fiction. With intense action and futuristic themes, the film became a cult classic and cemented Schwarzenegger's star status. The Village People perform at Madison Square Garden in June 1979, thrilling the crowd with hits like YMCA and Macho Man. The group marked disco culture and the pop scene with vibrant and memorable performances. Back to the Future, the first film in a sci-fi trilogy about teenager Marty McFly and his time-traveling DeLorean, premiered in 1985 and quickly became the year's highest-grossing film. The hula hoop, invented in 1958, remained popular through the 1960s. This simple plastic hoop became a craze among kids and adults, standing out as a classic form of fun for a generation. Marilyn Monroe, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, was found dead on August 5, 1962, in her Los Angeles home. Her tragic death at 36 shocked the world, sparking debates on mental health and the pressures of fame. In 1966, the first episode of Star Trek aired, marking the beginning of one of the most famous sci-fi franchises in history. The series tackled social and cultural issues, creating a lasting legacy. In 1972, New York lit up at night with signs like the Horn and Hardart Automat, a famous eatery offering quick meals, symbolizing the city's fast-paced lifestyle. A kitchen in a Minnesota apartment in 1977, with dark wood cabinets and olive green appliances like the refrigerator and stove. This environment shows the practical and compact style typical of the 1970s, with tools and colors that defined the era. A woman places food packaging in a Whirlpool trash compactor in a 1970s kitchen. Innovative appliances like microwave ovens and blenders became popular at the time, making household tasks easier. In the 1970s, unisex fashion stood out, driven by the hippie movement. This trend introduced gender-neutral clothing, allowing people to express their individuality without conforming to traditional clothing norms. In the 1990s, shoes with built-in wheels, known as Heelys, became a craze among young students, offering a fun way to get around. The trial of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer drew worldwide attention in the early 1990s. Known for his brutal crimes, Dahmer was convicted of multiple murders, shocking the public with disturbing case details. Women shopped at the supermarket with curlers in their hair, a common scene in the 1960s. It was practical to go out with curlers, ensuring their hairstyle while handling daily errands. Cast members of the television series The Brady Bunch pose with a cake to celebrate the program's 100th episode. The series, which premiered in 1969, became a television staple, tackling family themes with a lighthearted touch. In 1982, young people gathered to play Dungeons and Dragons, exploring worlds of fantasy and adventure. In basements, living rooms, and libraries, they immersed themselves in these adventures, making the game a phenomenon and marking the beginning of RPGs. The arrival of the first automated teller machines, ATMs, in the 1970s revolutionized personal finance, allowing 24-hour access to cash withdrawals, deposits, and balance inquiries. On May 9th, a major step forward was taken for women's rights with the FDA's approval of Enovid. The first birth control pill revolutionized reproductive control and provided greater autonomy for women. Ray Hudson mourns the loss of a friend's home, which caught fire after a magnitude 6.7 earthquake struck Los Angeles in January 1994. The disaster destroyed buildings and highways, resulting in at least 57 deaths and causing approximately $20 billion in damages. At age 23, Gary Anderson created the iconic recycling logo in 1970 for a contest. The symbol became widely recognized, promoting the importance of recycling and environmental conservation. A long line formed at theaters for the release of Jaws in 1975. Directed by Steven Spielberg, the film was a landmark in the industry, drawing crowds and becoming the first summer blockbuster. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Afro hairstyle became popular, symbolizing identity and pride in the African American community. This look embraced natural hair and played an important role in the civil rights movement. The debut of Miami Vice in 1984 had a major impact on fashion and aesthetics. With colorful suits, blazers, and a tropical vibe, the series inspired trends in the 1980s and defined the cool style of the decade. The street fashion of the 1980s stood out with its vibrant colors, bold prints, and diverse styles. Young people mixed pieces and created unique looks. Atlantic City in 1960, with its famous boardwalk, attracted visitors looking for fun and entertainment. The city was one of the top vacation destinations, known for its casinos and vibrant nightlife that charmed tourists from all over the country. A young girl has fun jumping rope on a sidewalk in 1961. Back then, playing outside was common for children. It was on the streets that friends gathered to enjoy activities like jumping rope and playing hopscotch. A jazz band plays from the back of a truck as it moves through the streets of Harlem in the summer of 1970. This type of performance was common at community events and festivals, bringing music to the streets. Motorola Vice President John F. Mitchell unveils the company's new portable radio telephone system in 1973, marking the beginning of the mobile phone era. Skateboarding gained popularity in the 1970s, especially with the Z-Boys in California. This group revolutionized the sport with daring tricks and a unique style, making skateboarding an icon of youth culture. The 3 Mile Island incident in 1979 was the largest nuclear accident in the U.S. A reactor in Pennsylvania malfunctioned, releasing small amounts of radiation and raising concerns about nuclear safety. The streets of New York were filled with games of three-card Monte, a popular street card trick in the 1970s and 1980s. Street performers lured in curious tourists, though it was often a scam. The technology of the 1970s had a unique aesthetic, as seen in this TV studio. The control panel is filled with buttons and small monitors, showing how television production worked before the digital era. A moment in Harlem, New York in 1963. A father crosses the street with his 2 children, holding a tricycle in his hands. A time when families enjoyed urban spaces more, even in a city like New York. A Pan American flight attendant serves champagne in the first-class cabin of a Boeing 747. In the 1970s, flying first class was a luxurious experience, with services like spacious seats, gourmet meals, and a variety of drinks. It's hard to talk about the 1980s without mentioning Madonna. In 1982, she rose to fame with singles like Everybody and Burning Up, which were hits in clubs. Soon, she became the queen of pop. During the Cold War, families visited nuclear shelters, underscoring the fear of atomic attacks. At the time, these spaces were seen as a necessary safety measure in a period of significant global tension. Michael Jackson leads the Jackson 5 during their first television special in 1971. Broadcast by ABC, the program highlighted the group's talent and established Michael as a rising star, helping to popularize pop and soul music. A family enjoys dinner while watching a 3D movie in 1982. 3D technology, which had existed since the 1920s, made a comeback in the 1980s with red and blue cardboard glasses. On October 17, 1989, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck San Francisco at the start of Game 3 of the World Series between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics, stopping the game and causing significant damage to the city. Pedestrians walk along Fulton Street in Manhattan in 1977. On the sign of a cafe, we see breakfast special, single egg on a roll, 35 cents. Adjusted for inflation, that would be around $1.50 today. Times Square has always been a vibrant place. In the 1970s, its billboards and lights already attracted tourists, making it an unmissable destination in the city. Knowing how to sew with a machine was a basic skill. Many families mended their clothes, curtains, and other items instead of buying new ones, as this was more economical and prolonged the life of these items. An anti-gun activist group installed the death clock in Times Square in 1993. The counter displayed the rising number of gun-related deaths in the U.S., becoming a grim symbol in the city. Sally K. Ride made history as the first American woman in space in 1983. Her mission not only broke gender barriers but also inspired generations of women to pursue careers in science and engineering. During vacations in Cape Canaveral, Florida, children watched rocket launches with binoculars, fascinated by the era of space exploration that defined the 1960s. On August 21, 1964, the Beatles arrived in Seattle, greeted by an ecstatic crowd. At the time, they were on their first tour across the United States, thrilling the nation with their unique sound. Small business owners in New York protested the construction of the World Trade Center, fearing the project would bring significant changes and negatively impact their businesses, forcing local shops to close. In 1960s Harlem, a mother and her child cool off with water from an open fire hydrant on a hot day. This scene shows the simplicity and joy of summer games, with improvised fun on the streets. The New York City skyline went dark during the blackout of 1965, caused by a failure in a transmission line that quickly left millions without power across several northeastern cities. At JFK Airport, passengers watched the historic moment of Apollo 11 on television in July 1969, when about 600 million people saw Neil Armstrong take the first step on the moon. The first televised presidential debate in the United States brought Vice President Richard Nixon face-to-face with Senator John F. Kennedy. This event helped boost Kennedy's popularity, leading to his victory in the 1960 election. Hippies danced freely at the Summer of Love's Flower Children's Festival in 1967. This festival symbolized the peace and love of the generation, with young people celebrating to the sound of music and vibrant colors, marking the peak of the counterculture movement. The Statue of Liberty was surrounded by an oil slick from a spill of approximately 105,700 gallons in New York Harbor in 1973. The accident happened when an oil tanker collided in the Hudson River. Protesters clashed with police in the Stonewall riots of 1969, standing up for gay rights. This historic event in Greenwich Village, New York, marked the beginning of the resistance movement for LGBTQ rights. In the late 1970s, fuel shortages led to long lines at gas stations across the United States. Drivers waited hours to refuel, and some stations even limited the amount of gasoline per customer. A woman participates in a reproductive rights march in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1974. Movements like this gained momentum in the decade, with activists demanding access to contraceptives, sex education, and the right to safe abortion. The National Guard advanced on protesters at Kent State University in May 1970. The confrontation occurred during protests against the Vietnam War, resulting in the death of 4 students. In the 1970s, New York faced a significant increase in arson. Often, these fires were set by financially struggling property owners hoping to profit from insurance. President Richard Nixon meets with Elvis Presley at the White House on December 21, 1970. During the meeting, Presley handed Nixon a letter expressing his support for fighting drugs and his desire to assist the government with youth issues. On September 20, 1973, the historic Battle of the Sexes took place in tennis when female champion Billie Jean King faced former male champion Bobby Riggs at the Houston Astrodome. King won the match, which attracted an estimated global audience of 90 million. Stevie Wonder shined in the 1970s and 1980s. With albums like Songs in the Key of Life, he blended soul, funk, and pop in a way that touched many hearts. His songs were not just hits, they spoke of love, struggle, and hope. This downtown Washington parking lot was overflowing with vehicles during a bus strike in May 1974. With 250,000 people seeking alternative transportation, the city faced monumental traffic jams, as there were more cars than spaces. Ronald Reagan stands alongside icons like John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Frank Sinatra at a gala event. His career as an actor in Hollywood helped build his charismatic image, making his transition to politics smoother. Dolly Parton, the queen of country music, rose to fame in the 1960s and 1970s. With her heartfelt lyrics and distinctive voice, she won over audiences and brought country music to the mainstream. In NASA's control room during the Apollo 13 mission, the team monitors the return of the astronauts to Earth after an accident compromised the mission to land on the Moon. In February 1979, Space Mountain opened at Disney World in Florida. This indoor roller coaster stood out for its space theme and quickly became one of the park's most popular attractions. Women marched in Washington in 1977, calling for the ratification of the 27th Amendment, which sought to guarantee equal rights between men and women. Then President Gerald Ford sits before the House Judiciary Subcommittee, debating his decision to grant a pardon to former President Richard Nixon over the Watergate scandal. In May 1980, Mount St. Helens, considered a dormant volcano, erupted after an earthquake. The massive eruption shocked the world, causing environmental damage and impacting life in the region. On May 25, 1977, fans lined up to see the first Star Wars movie at the Coronet Theater in San Francisco. With 2,000 seats, the theater became a popular destination for the saga before it was demolished in 2007. Anyone who lived in the Great Lakes region in the 1970s likely remembers the Great Blizzard of 1978. In January, the area was hit by an intense snowstorm lasting 2 days, bringing a remarkable 34 inches of snow. On February 22, 1980, the United States defeated the Soviet Union in ice hockey in a historic event known as the Miracle on Ice. The team, made up of college students and amateurs, made history by achieving the unexpected. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson face off in June 1984 as the Boston Celtics compete against the LA Lakers in the NBA championship. This rivalry became one of the greatest in basketball history. CNN debuted on June 1, 1980, as the first cable news network, with Lois Hart and David Walker as anchors. The network revolutionized real-time news broadcasting. Anyone who lived through the 1970s remembers the famous show MASH, a sitcom about the Korean War. Its final episode, broadcast in 1983, reached 125 million viewers, a record on TV. The Oprah Winfrey Show debuted in 1986 and quickly became the nation's most popular talk show, attracting a large audience and establishing Oprah as an influential figure on television. Halley's Comet appears only once per generation, and the last time it passed Earth was in October 1986. This event fascinated astronomers and enthusiasts who eagerly awaited its passage. Joe Montana was the quarterback who led the San Francisco 49ers to victory in the 1985 Super Bowl. His decisive performance cemented his reputation as one of the greats in American football history. A supergroup of 45 famous musicians, including Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, and Madonna, gathered in January 1985 to record "We Are the World," raising awareness and funds to combat famine in Africa. Bill Buckner, the Boston Red Sox's first baseman during Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. The phrase "it gets by Buckner" echoed as he missed the ball, contributing to their loss to the New York Mets. First Lady Nancy Reagan participates in a Just Say No rally in California. The campaign became an important part of the 1980s anti-drug movement, raising awareness about drug use among young people. In 1965, the Gateway Arch in St. Louis was in its final stages of construction. At 630 feet tall, the arch became a symbol of the westward expansion of the United States. Two young people embraced during the Woodstock Festival in 1969, which gathered approximately 400,000 people. The event became an icon of the hippie movement and left a lasting mark on American culture. Protests against the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s mobilized millions in the U.S. and worldwide. Driven by discontent with the war, they took over universities and streets, leading to the withdrawal of American troops. Norma McCorvey, known as Jane Roe in the landmark Roe v. Wade case of 1973, is seen outside the Supreme Court in Washington in 1989. Her story was fundamental in the fight for reproductive rights in the United States. Bill Clinton appeared on MTV's Choose or Lose, connecting directly with young voters. This appearance helped attract new voters and expanded his reach among the youth. In the 1980s, the cola wars between Coca-Cola and Pepsi dominated the market, with bold campaigns and the famous blind taste test challenge. This rivalry marked a generation. The MGM Grand Hotel fire in Las Vegas in 1980 was a devastating tragedy. Sparked by electrical failures, it resulted in the deaths of 85 people and led to changes in fire safety regulations. Muhammad Ali was drafted to serve in Vietnam but refused enlistment, citing religious and conscientious objections. His refusal sparked controversy and led to a legal battle. Ted Bundy is seen during his trial in 1979 in Tallahassee, Florida. One of the most infamous serial killers in American history, his case drew intense media attention, raising questions about the nature of evil. The assassination of President Kennedy shocked America. Many businesses closed as a sign of respect and mourning. The optimism his presidency had brought faded, leaving citizens with feelings of uncertainty and disillusionment. Bobby Seale, left, national chairman of the Black Panther Party, and Huey P. Newton, Minister of Defense, were two influential leaders in the movement, fighting for civil rights and racial equality. At a protest in New York in 1985, a sign reading, "Fight AIDS, not gays," emerged as a response to the stigma surrounding AIDS. At the time, prejudice was fueled by the AIDS crisis, often called the gay plague by society. The Gay Pride Parade in Times Square in 1973 was a milestone in the fight for LGBTQ rights. 1 year after Stonewall, about 2,000 participants marched, promoting visibility and resilience. In 1971, John Lennon and Yoko Ono displayed a Christmas peace message on a large billboard in Times Square. With the words, "War is over, if you want it," The poster was part of a global campaign for peace during the Vietnam War. On the first Earth Day, April 22, 1970, New Yorkers skated to work, while others walked or biked, promoting eco-friendly transportation alternatives. On May 10, 1994, New Yorkers and the Statue of Liberty witnessed an annular solar eclipse when the moon blocked the sun, creating a ring of fire around its edges. The photographer captured this image using a welder's glass over the lens to protect from the light. The Hands Across America movement brought millions of people together in May 1986, attempting to form a human chain from New York to California to raise awareness and funds for hunger and homelessness in the United States. Richard Nixon says goodbye to his staff outside the White House in Washington in 1974. Boarding a helicopter to Andrews Air Force Base after resigning from the presidency amid the Watergate scandal. Prince concluded his 1985 Purple Rain tour with an epic 20-minute performance at the Orange Bowl in Miami. The final show highlighted his unique energy and presence, leaving a lasting impression on fans and live music history. A crowd gathers in front of John Lennon's building in New York, where he was shot and killed on December 8, 1980. Fans worldwide mourned the loss of the music legend. Before the tumultuous period and shaved head era, Britney Spears, born in Mississippi, was a talented 17-year-old who burst onto the scene in 1999 with her hit Baby One More Time, beginning her journey as a pop icon. The U.S. women's soccer team has won the World Cup multiple times, solidifying their position as a powerhouse in women's soccer. Their victories have inspired generations and increased visibility for women's sports. The crime-ridden and tense atmosphere of the early 1990s was marked by the Crown Heights riots in 1991 in Brooklyn. The conflict between Black and Jewish communities lasted 4 days, exposing racial and cultural divides in the city. From electric pots to microwave ovens, various innovative items became household staples. Although microwaves were introduced in 1955, they only became practical and affordable in the 1970s. Cyndi Lauper shows off her award for Best Music Video at the first MTV Awards in 1984, won for Girls Just Wanna Have Fun. The video became a feminist anthem and helped establish Lauper as a leading voice of the decade. Democratic presidential candidate Michael Dukakis is seen in an armored tank during a visit to a military equipment manufacturer during his 1988 campaign. The strategy was criticized and regarded as a significant mistake. Graphic t-shirts were a must-have fashion in the 1970s. Images of Jaws and Snoopy, among other characters, were available in any store. These t-shirts captured pop culture icons that defined the generation. Patriotic organizations participated in a parade in New York to celebrate the end of the Vietnam War. With prisoners of war and veterans returning home, the event brought emotion and relief, marking the conclusion of a conflict that had divided the nation. White House Press Secretary Ron Nessen joined Chevy Chase, who impersonated President Gerald Ford in an Oval Office sketch on Saturday Night Live in 1975, known for its political satire. Newspaper headlines about the Y2K problem reflected the anxiety of the 1990s. Many feared disruptions to banking, power grids, and communication systems with the turn of the millennium. The Space Shuttle Enterprise made history in the 1970s by landing for the first time on a hard surface. It was an exciting moment in a time when the world was captivated by the idea of space exploration.